Hello and welcome to the grand finale of the Local Writers Read 2020 season. Um, as we wind things down, we are looking forward to having three more readers today. If you joined us last night, then you got to see part one of our session. If you didn't get the chance to see that, it is up live on Facebook and YouTube, and will be up on our website shortly. So our theme this time is hard exit, and it seemed fitting when we were choosing themes, looking at endings of the season, of the year, of various things that are going on. And so we have three more readers who will be sharing their perspective, their writing on that theme. And so we'll be looking at that. And I'll get to those bios in just a moment, but I just want to start off by, as always, thanking Quiet City Books, who has been our sponsor, our co-host, our place of just really the home for the series when we are in person. And also for the Lewiston Public Library, who co-sponsors and has just been a champion of this series and really just the arts in Lewiston, Auburn, and Central Maine. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our three readers for today. And then we will get right to the fun. So up first is Local Writers Read co-organizer, Claire Guyton. She has been a Maine Arts Commission Literary Fellow and a finalist for the Maine Literary Award, and her work has been selected for the Best Small Fictions Anthology and nominated for a Pushcart. Her short fiction appears in Crazy Horse, Mid-American Review, Vestal Review, River Styx, Sliver of Stone magazine, and many other journals, as well as in the Maine anthology Summer Stories. She is currently revising a linked story collection and researching a novel set in 1890s Maine. After that, we will hear from Linda Aldrich, who received an MFA from Vermont College and has published two collections of poetry, Foothold and March and Mad Women. A new collection will be published this February entitled Ballast. She is currently serving as Portland, Maine's 6th Poet Laureate and co-hosts the Local Buzz reading series at Thomas Memorial Library in Cape Elizabeth. And finally, we have Annaliese Jakimides. Her poetry and prose have been broadcast on local and national public radio and published in many journals, magazines, and anthologies. Nominated for the Pushcart Prize, she has been a finalist for the Stephen Dunn Poetry Prize and the Maine Literary Awards in both poetry and nonfiction, among others. She has new work in Cabildo Quarterly, as well as in the anthologies Plague Papers and Enough, Poems of Resistance and Protest. And you can find her at annalisejakimides.com. So I'll hand it over to Claire in just a moment, but for those who are tuning in, feel free to leave comments or questions in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. We'll have some time for discussion. But without further ado, Claire, take it away.
Thank you so much. I can't believe we're at our final installment of 2020. It's been quite the virtual journey this year. And I'm so delighted to be reading with Annaliese and Linda. Couldn't imagine two better ladies to take our final leap with. So I'm going to be reading a short story called Mata Hari's Head. And this story is written in the form of a report. Case H21, Mata Hari's Head, final report. Mata Hari's head has gone missing. There is no doubt that the embalmed head was packed and shipped by the French government, as promised, finally, after all these years. See Appendix 1A3 for a copy of the receipt and note the clear signature of Mr. Edouard Vergris, head curator of the Museum of Contemporary History. I remember the day, says Vergris, as he hunches into himself. He is a small man, the sort who could be relieved of his wallet by a sneer. His teeth have seen better days. He mops his face and neck with a handkerchief. Admittedly, it is hot in this room, not to mention stuffy. Who would not be curious, Fairgree asks, mopping and mopping. Getting Mata Hari's head, who would not look? And what? Did you find her beautiful? Mopping still. Is he nervous? That final gunshot to the head, that put the kibosh on beautiful. Pretty then? Fairgree's mouth twitches once, twice. From what I could tell, her bones were good. So you remember the day, her head, you looked at it, then what? What then what? I cataloged it, along with the other artifacts and papers shipped with the head. You see the file, and I shelved it all with other recently accessioned items. And yet it is not there. A bead of sweat glides along the left side of Fairgree's nose. It is not there. And because it is not there, it cannot be displayed for the good of the people. There are folk, patrons we call them, fine tax-paying citizens, who enjoy the occasional trip to a museum and who would find Mata Hari's head educational. On a field trip to the Museum of Contemporary History, for example, a middle school teacher might lead her students to the glass jar that contains Mata Hari's head, read the printed biographical information mounted at the base of the display, and then broach the topic of patriotism, or the role of women in Western society, or the history of dance, or the ethics of the death penalty, or the cruelty of circumstance, or the science of embalming, or the brutality of war, or the human desire to memorialize, or the purpose of macabre spectacle. The Museum of Contemporary History has a security camera above its main entrance. The staff archives the film of people coming in and out of the museum for use in exactly this sort of reprehensible circumstance, the theft of Mata Hari's head. If museum property goes missing, authorities can view the film, looking for suspects and clues. In this case, no one knows when the property went missing. We know only that the head disappeared between the time that it was shelved by Edouard Fairgree and September 1st of this year, when a new employee, a one Marie Fantoul, who fancies herself a keeper of women's history, but didn't say so when interviewed for her job as exhibit director, decided to install a Mata Hari exhibit. That is almost 3 years of videotape. In the first week of the time frame in question, at least 14 museum visitors carried a bag or backpack in which a glass jar containing a head might be concealed. At least, because there are times when too many people enter at once, and what people are carrying is unclear. But that's 14 suspects in just 1 week, 14 unidentified suspects. Suppose a young woman who works at the bank downtown finds herself on a Saturday with a couple of free hours. She goes to the Museum of Contemporary History. She wanders with no plan, happy to be inspired, to be guided, to be expanded by all things contemporary, all things historical. She stops occasionally to admire this, that. That looks like a human head. It is Mata Hari, the spy, the sly beauty, the iconic femme fatale. The printed biographical information at the base of the display includes this. Mata Hari was photographed in various attitudes of undress, but very rarely without a bra because she was self-conscious about having small breasts. Of all women, Mata Hari, exotic dancer, international seductress, courtesan of the world's most powerful men, worried about her breast size. She risked and ultimately lost her life to serve as a spy, but she wouldn't take off her bra. When they executed her, she was so calm she didn't need to be bound, and she refused a blindfold. According to eyewitnesses, her facial expression didn't change as the firing squad shot her. That is the stuff Mata Hari was made of, and yet she wouldn't take off her bra. And our young woman? She lays a hand on her chest. She studies the rubbery, disembodied face of the ultimate sex symbol and wonders if she should get blonde highlights. Upon further investigation, a lead. According to a log maintained by a mostly silent and possibly incompetent administrative assistant with angry eyes and black painted fingernails, a researcher by the name of Alistair Blum spent more than 2 hours with the Mata Hari collection not quite a year ago. Mr. Blum is young, not much past 30, but there are dark splotches under his eyes. His office at the local forgettable branch of the university is crowded with books and papers and the scent of a tuna sandwich. He holds a can of Diet Coke close to his chest. Can you tell me what you saw in the archive? Blum sips the Coke, then taps his computer keyboard a few times with a very long index finger. He reads from the monitor. 5 bobby pins, 1 pair of white gloves, 1 pair of black gloves, 1 fingernail file, 1 head, 1 head? Pardon? As though there might be 2? I'm being precise. He sips his drink again. It's just the way I take notes. So you did see Mata Hari's head? Yes, I saw it. And did you find her beautiful? He sips, turns again to the monitor. I found her dead. But just the head. Of course, just the head. Good bones? Blum leans closer to the screen, as if the answer is in his notes, his very precise notes. Hard to say. An embalmed head doesn't exactly inspire inspection. No? Not for me, no. But anyway, you saw it. Now the Coke can comes down to the desk and his eyes wander. He sighs before he speaks, a long sigh, a sigh that might be described as bored or frightened or sad or merely accurate. I did. Which narrows the time frame of the crime. Assuming, that is, Mr. Blum himself did not steal Mata Hari's head. Doesn't inspire inspection. It is entirely possible that a tired, middle-aged butcher who, when he was 19, narrowly missed competing in the Summer Olympics. Probably his former super fitness is what compels him now to call himself fatty, might decide on an unexpected day off to go to the Museum of Contemporary History. He read a few years ago that the museum had acquired Mata Hari's head, and he has always wanted to see it. Why, fatty? Because you want a woman's eyes to gaze upon you without registering disgust? And there she is, Mata Hari, spy. He reads the biographical information provided. Dutch. Wait, didn't his mother say her father was Dutch? I don't know, fatty, weren't you listening? Probably he should call his mother and ask. When was the last time they spoke? Probably he should just call his mother. He drifts away, unable to look again at the mottled face of the famous World War I spy, at the same time that he entertains thoughts of his mother. Yes, he will call her. But first, lunch. Of course, lunch, fatty, always the next meal with you. Or is it possible that Fatty, the worn-out butcher, will never fix his hooded eyes on Mata Hari's recovered head at the museum, exhibited for the good of the people, because he studies her blurred features in his hobby shed, or in the boot of that broken-down car in the garage, or in an old locker at the back of the butcher shop? The museum's video footage clearly shows there was a fat man, a very fat man, carrying a large canvas bag in March of this year into the museum and then out of it, quick as you please. And last year, in July, another slightly less fat man carrying a leather satchel, and a stocky man that same month with a backpack slung over his right shoulder, and a man with a plastic grocery bag, and one with a paper sack, and another with those damn backpacks. On and on they wobble in and out with their bags, and every single unfit, unworthy, unrecognizable one could have absconded with Mata Hari's head. How to find them all in check? See Appendix 2 for a copy of the complete file on Mata Hari's execution, stamped with the official seal of the French Republic, which, it must be remembered, celebrates the ideals of liberty, equality, and brotherhood. Review of the file reveals no clues about who might have wanted to steal Mata Hari's head. It does confirm that the Mata Hari items shipped to the Museum of Contemporary History match in every respect the items cataloged in the museum's Mata Hari collection and Alistair Blum's precise notes, excepting, of course, the head. The copied file in Appendix 2 includes the incident report by the coroner who severed and embalmed Mata Hari's head. He indicates the state in which he found the body, details the manner of preparation when embalming the head, records the exact measurements of the glass jar. The final page of the report is a memo to his superior summarizing his work. Apropos of nothing, the coroner concludes his memo with this personal reflection. What a shame to execute such a woman. Even in death, it is evident that she was quite beautiful. One mystery solved. A search of the homes of Edouard Vergris and Alistair Blum reveals no evidence whatsoever of Mata Hari's head. Continued study of the videotape taken by the security cameras during the relevant time frame yields additional unidentified suspects carrying large bags and backpacks. Given the current scarcity of funds for this investigation, there is little hope that these suspects can ever be identified. It is recommended that future visitors be required to check large bags and backpacks at a location in the lobby of the museum. Senior staff are considering this recommendation, but it is too late, of course, to safeguard Mata Hari's head. Mata Hari's head, it must be assumed, is forever lost. Thank you. Linda, it is your turn.
Hi, thank you, Claire. That was quite a journey with the head there. I loved it. And I'm really delighted to be here reading with you and with Annaliese. It's always an honor to be invited to read, especially during these strange times. It's really, we're lucky that we have the opportunity to Zoom with each other, I think. So with that, I'll begin. I have 5 poems, and I've written them during the time of the pandemic, so they're all relatively new. This was written May 25th, 2020. Day of 100,000 dead. A slight wind and the apple trees, cherry trees, clustering red seed maples drop their blossoms into soft circles of pink and white on the grass. Each circle a place where beauty would bloom once again. Each petal a face still alive to us, whispering. How do we take up these petals? How do we do this? Locked down inside our houses, sanitized and vigilant, our stores of dried beans, our Zoom calls like trains of waving passengers pressed against the windows, passing us by, passing us by. Meanwhile, another spring arrives. Our small planet orbits and rotates in predictable patterns, pulls a dark trail of suffering into one more sunset, one more day's tally of death. Heavy and slow with disbelief, we mask ourselves, keep a safe distance. As dreams run aground, the world reels, wrecks itself in chaos. What can we do for the fragile heads of the dying? How do we hold them in our laps while they fade and vanish? How do we pray? How do we carry them? This is a prose poem that was written after an interaction I had out in my front yard in April. So we're backing up a month. It's called Incubation. I want to say that the woman that I meet, I had never met before, nor have I seen since, which is kind of interesting. Incubation. I make myself go outside to dig space for flowers I don't dare purchase yet. A woman comes walking in a black scarf, plays strings in the city's orchestra, lives alone, is running out of money. Received a bit from the musicians' fund, but not near enough, to pay the bills. And should she call her mortgage company, or is it better not to let them know? No space for flowers where she lives, so walks this way to see people doing things in yards, hasn't talked to anyone for days, can't get through to unemployment. All bouncing ball non sequiturs like a child who tells a movie. Come see my mourning dove nest, I say. Did you know foxes climb trees? The skinny red one wandering our yard might climb this arbor, so I keep watch with binoculars, my round circles of reach. The urge to brood so strong, a dove will sit on a pine cone or stone for weeks, waiting for something to change. When my mother was dying, she says, I sat by her bed for a week, watched her try to breathe. She'd arch up, then collapse. Made me cringe in my chair, but at least I could be there. The body fights to stay alive, I say, to not shut down. And then I remember my own mother's final hours, feel my sturdy self deconstitute. Not an unhatched stone, but no wisdom either. Not sure about your mortgage. Do you play your violin to keep in shape? Early mornings. And now she plies her bow arm in the air to wave goodbye. I'll try to write a poem today, I say to her disappearing coat, and feel again that ache of absence grown familiar, lonely tune of hairline strain and wobbled note. Now we come to August 2020. Comet in the time of pandemic. We find it under the cup of the Big Dipper, smudged fingerprint of light with a split and widening tail. Long-haired stars, the Greeks called them. This one last seen 6,800 years ago. Who on earth was looking up then to see this 3-mile diameter ball of ice and dust with enough water to fill 30 million Olympic-sized swimming pools? Before the Greeks built pools or carried torches to Mount Olympus in pursuit of excellence. Imagine having that much faith in what we could do. And if this comet has eyes to see, does it look down on our blue planet and know what is endured here? God knows the night sky is a mighty thing with its constellated jewels and a proper moon that hides its face and grows ever more doleful. Our lives seen as tiny points of light in time and space are so small, we are not perceived by the naked eye quickly enough to catch us in our bills and junk mail, our groceries, shoes, glasses, orthotics, and carefully groomed dogs. Nothing is noted, factored in, registered by even the most powerful of interstellar telescopes, if indeed anyone is looking. And the most invisible are those of us who are hungry and have given up, are given up, sitting under tarps in the high heat, all husks and eyes, parched lips unable to ask if there is more to it. Bugs in a jar, we move around a bit, then expire faster than anything else as intelligent as we think we are. And this poem means less the farther you go from it, and the going from here is endless. Forever and ever, we say about living happily at the end of our countless stories, and not an iota of evidence to support those ideals we claim to make ourselves a wee bit bigger and better before the Ursa Majors, our foraging greedy bears, eat us and spit us out as just more frozen dust balls, casting about through time, dragging our sorry tails. This time has really given us a lot of time to think about our connections. I know it has me. I've thought about people I haven't thought about for years and haven't connected with for years, one of whom is my youngest sister. There are three of us, I'm the eldest, with whom I have not spoken for over 35 years. And there seems to be no hope of that ever healing. So I finally decided to write a poem about this. And I do quote a couple of, some lyrics from a couple of songs, lyrics from Watch Closely Now by Chris Christopherson in A Star is Born, 1976. And also from my coloring book, the second Barbra Streisand album, 1963. To my rumored other sister, whispered sister, I count back the years to your red braids where it ended. Watch closely now. A sister lost is a swallowed self. Are you watching me now? I'm a sad and guarded sister. Master magician, the more I crawled along my olive branch, the more angry you were. Oldest of the three who's setting you free, was I not your lauded sister? Undaunted sister, flying us from the foaming river, from the lies you've been told, the unhinged house when they're breaking your back. A loved sister, bring your last straw to me, sister. I packed my bags and sent you foreign postcards, straw to gold, left you to handle it alone. Gonna need you later, don't look down. You won't forgive my not around. Haunted sister, color it lonely. Home early from school, I stood rooted, heard you secret sing, become Barbra Streisand in the basement. The room I sleep in, walk in, weep in, hide in that nobody sees. Oh, you were so crazy captured, sister. But truth be told, the most gifted, song lifted. And this is my final poem. And it is my newest poem, and I'm actually still revising it. A friend of mine who lives in California had pretty serious heart surgery 3 weeks ago, and I was going to be Zooming with her. And I wanted to have something that I could write for her because I wasn't sure if she would make it. She did. She's doing great. But this was before I knew that would happen. And I met her when I was at UNH I started there in the fall of 1966. And I decided to take some French classes in addition to English classes because I knew there was a junior year abroad program that I might qualify for if I took enough of those French classes. So I ended up doing sort of a double major, and I met Cynthia during that time. So we've been friends ever since. So this has some French in it, a little bit. The heart has its reasons for Cynthia. On my wall, a hand-tinted print of booksellers along the Seine. Just after the war, two women sit on bent wire chairs talking. The world takes a breath, perhaps October. 23 years later, you and I will sit there, smiling, pourquoi pas, drunk on Paris. 50 years have passed, another October, and we are still friends. From my desk lamp, a finger puppet of Eleanor Roosevelt seems to lean out and wave one arm at me. In her purple hat and mink fur stole, she will forever be d'un certain âge. Remember her strangely modulated voice? How she was pas du tout jolie, not at all pretty, and it didn't matter? How freeing that was? Now we are d'un certain âge. My Eleanor is buoyed by a great lump of magnetic heart stuck to the metal of my lamp. She watches me with benevolent embroidered eyes. Soyez sage, soyez courageuse, Madame Genret would say to you each time you left the house. She knew American girls were foolish. What did we know of her war? Mon ami, ma meilleure amie, how we ran with our luggage, hearts bursting from the man in the expensive car who drove into the dark woods. On Thursday, you will have open heart surgery. How much more open can a heart be if it is already open? Oh, our numerous petits coups de foudre, the young men we fell for at first sight, the names we still remember. La vie continue, we married, divorced, married again, no children came. Nos cœurs brisés, how we wore out the phone lines, examining intricacies of feeling, the valves of friendship pumping us through. You tell me they will stop your heart. Your heart will not beat for some minutes. In Monsieur Houdon's class, we absorbed Pascal's pensée like food. Le cœur a ses raisons que la raison ne connaît pas. The heart has its reasons that reason doesn't know. On Thursday, I will sit in a wire chair near the booksellers, the Seine flowing past under a golden sun. Your heart in my heart. I will save the chair next to me and wait for you to come. Thank you. And now we shall have Annaliese.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'm always astounded to witness your voice and your sense of place and how you ground us there in meaningful, personal yet universal terms. So thank you very much. I do appreciate that. And also what I appreciate as I'm here today is that we're dealing with hard exit. And I'm moved by how a two-word phrase like hard exit can move us all, direct us all individually to different places. And it's why I absolutely love this series that Josh and Claire and Courtney have made, that we are enabled to make that walk in our own ways. This is an excerpt from a work in progress, and it follows the first year after my youngest son died, and to be clear, after my youngest son took his life. It's something I never thought I would ever write about, and that's true of a lot of what writers write about. It's not intentional to begin with. It starts like this. I am standing here, just standing, unable to bend or move, my chin at an angle even I can recognize as odd, my jaw clenched, no words possible, arms locked at my sides. I know that I will be the last person who knew my son to see him, the only one to see him like this, lying on a table, not a bed, but a table, high enough for him and me to be kneading bread. That's it. It's counter height. My 21-year-old son is lying on a counter. Counters are familiar, and so now I can, after 15 or 20 minutes, maybe an hour, I think, of just standing here, by my unbreathing son, I can finally take his hand. I used to do that years ago when we made bread together, weaving my fingers through his, laying my calloused palms on his tiny knuckles, his long bony fingers, my aproned stomach pressed up against his back. His head was there against my heart. I could practically hear him thinking, this cerebral, funny boy of mine, who would continue to consider the torque of engines and the laughter of lions right through his last days. He will have added other things to his repertoire of compelling subjects, conundrums, and odd interests, but the torque and the lion will be there too. They've already pulled the sheet down from his face, and I'm grateful for that. Grateful that I do not have to watch him being exposed, that he's already here, that I can see his face, that I am approaching him. I am happy to see him, so happy, even if it's the last time, the very last time. We, my son and I, are in a room in the state trooper barracks headquarters something building. Words are already puffing away, separating from me in some way unimaginable. This is where they have people identify the loved ones, the departed. And oh my dear, you are loved, but fuck it all, they don't get it. You are not departed. I kiss your hard, cold forehead. I'm surprised at the way you feel under my lips. So familiar, you the one who hated kissing and hugging. You may have loved sex, I don't know, but I suspect that the hug-kiss disconnect might have applied even then. I lay my cheek against your cheek, kiss your nose, your lips, first one ear and then the other. I run my fingers through your hair. That has not changed. And I wonder whether hair remains just hair. I climb up on the edge of the table, one leg dangling down to the floor to stabilize me. They only provide a narrow space. Maybe they're afraid that every one of us who must do this will climb up onto the counter and nuzzle our faces into the armpit of our loved one, that they will have to pry us away from the body, hungry for the shape, for the scent, for the wholeness. I know I should smell gunpowder and grease, sweat and dirt, but all I smell is your floured fingers in a mound of bread dough. The trooper, his name is Paul Stewart, Trooper Paul Stewart, is standing right outside the door. I can hear him breathing. Well, actually, I don't recognize any of it. Him, the breathing, the kindness. I don't recognize any of it until afterwards. After my two other children, a son, a daughter, come home and go away again to live their lives minus their brother. After the celebration of Auric's life, after people realize there is nothing I can let them do for me, nothing. That all the work is mine, whether that makes sense to them or not. After my world assumes a state of almost catatonic silence, punctuated by 6-hour nightly wails with Dr. Zhang cranked up to the nines. If someone walked by my apartment door, they would hear wild, blustery blues piano banging, a pounding, gravelly man's voice, not a middle-aged woman coming unhinged. Paul Stewart is the one who called me in the morning to tell me, but what I thought he would be telling me when he said he was a state trooper calling about my Auric was that my boy was in jail, that he'd stolen a car. Someone had left a message on my phone in the middle of the night about Auric taking his car, a crazy, pranky thing he would do, take a friend's car without permission, drive like crazy into the blackness of night on inky country roads under sequins of stars, and my boy, just barely a man, squealing tires, anxious for the swell of engine power snaking down his arms, his hands clenching the wheel. He would be singing. If I had been there, I would have been able to smell his breath, a blend of danger and forgetfulness. I am sure on that last night, he would probably have forgotten to brush his teeth. The weather was good for Auric's arrival. He was 2 years old. Actually, he was 2 years, 5 months, and 7 days old on a brilliant gold October day. The sweet apple-scented wind scooped the leaves mid-flight and gentled them down to a still warm earth, much the way I wanted to gentle him, my third child, second boy, the youngest, the moment I saw his black and white grainy photo in the Ohio adoption book. I don't know what else to call it but the book. Hundreds of children stare out from the thin, cheap paper pages. The children are varying ages and sizes and colors, but none are babies. Since we had few requirements, healthy, preferably under the age of 5, we could leave the babies for the people who were pining for them anyway. I had done the baby thing once with my first son. Once was good. I had already done the adoption thing with my oldest, my daughter. We tried for a few more that didn't pan out, the autistic son of a Nigerian prince, an 18-month-old from Florida, and a sibling group of 5, ages 2 to 12, with one set of twins. I know that adoptive parents often say that they picked their child so that he or she will feel chosen, as if there was something special, spectacular that made the child leap from the page into their hearts. The truth is that many children leapt from the pages into my heart. I could have had a house full of 40 at that rate, probably more, except for all the socks I would have had to wash. One could argue I was spared when the state of Connecticut refused to place the family of 5 biracial kids across color lines and split them up instead. How would I have even kept up with their socks? I have always wondered how they fared, whether they ever reunited, if they were loved, did they have at least keep the little twins together? I would have loved them. I can love. I know how to love, even if their socks were mismatched and rangy. I did not pick my Arik. He was the only one offered to us, but oh, how I love this little boy with a strong face, spindly legs, and piano fingers, who bruised my shins under a restaurant table in Columbus, Ohio, while he daintily blotted his 2-year-old lips with a napkin as I signed the placement papers his social worker slid across the Formica tabletop. 2 plane rides and a 2-hour drive later, he greeted his 5-year-old brother and his 6-year-old sister by smacking each of them in the face with a Matchbox Rolls Royce. Arik has been dead for 2 days. I have stopped answering the telephone. I have to. Someone else is answering it for me. Sometimes Lorraine or Linda, Chris. It is too much to keep telling the pieces of this story over and over again, to accept condolences, the sorrows, other people's tears. I am trying so hard not to cry. If I cry, I will rupture. I know it. Voices tense and relax, lilt and labor. I hear choking in the other room. I know they are sitting on the couch, filling up my chairs, lifting my teacups and goblets from the shelves made from wooden soda crates Arik had stacked for me in the kitchen. They make coffee and tea, iced licorice water with lime. Someone is smoking Camel cigarettes. I can smell Arik everywhere. Death often comes slowly in increments of loss or the possibility of loss, in hospital rooms with x-rays and cords of dripping fluids leaking in and leaking out. This death is fast, and my son knows it. He has planned it. But he didn't tell me. Of course he didn't tell me. But maybe he did. He told me he loved me, a rarity. Mom, I love you. I never told you that enough. I want you to remember I love you very much. I am the word woman. Ha! Listen to that tense form. I never told you. Enough. Remember. I should have heard that. He was telling me he was leaving. He told me, and I didn't hear him. Nothing here is happening in slow time. Nothing floats and settles. It is all race car track driving, trying to hold the line when you have never driven a race car, never smelled the acrid exhaust of a machine pushing beyond its storyline, imploding its soft-bellied engine. I am a body bleeding in bad light, the wheels ground out, the metal frame sparking and fragmenting until I am gripping the steering wheel, aiming to hold the line, just the line, until I can stop. I am keeping a mental scrapbook of the images of all the things you will not do. Bring home women, maybe men, whom I love because I will always find a way to love the partners my children attach themselves to, no matter the degree or length of time. Make a family, whatever that means to you. Live someplace where you pick out the furniture and the towels, someplace where I can send you presents of home goods like vases and garlic presses. Be the best man at your brother's wedding or the incandescent uncle I know you would be. Go to a high school reunion, wear a suit and tie, or maybe just a fancy silk shirt in magenta. It's magenta opalescent against your skin, both in sunlight and frostlight. There is so much on that list, but in every image, you are eternally 21. I'm going to skip here because in these 15 minutes, I cannot read deeply enough into that first year to take you through to the fabulous moments, the memories, take you into the light. And so I've chosen to shift here to the end of that first year. This is the saga of the first year following his death. And it's because I cannot bear to leave you in that darkness, in that heaviness. It's important to me that you know there's light even in this. So this is at the end. Soundtrack of my days and nights: Jamiroquai, Snoop Dogg, Mozart, Etta James, Gil Scott-Heron, Nina Simone. I select each one individually, put it in the player, one at a time, not every one, not every day. These days, the order is shifting, but there is always somewhere in the mix RX Jamiroquai, a group I never listened to until after he was gone. He had given me 3 of their CDs at Christmas, his last Christmas, when he had no presents for any of us. He gave them to me with no cases, no sleeves even, just naked, exposed, vulnerable CDs balanced in the palm of his beautiful hand. Feels So Good is the first thing I danced to after the night he left us. There was no dancing for months, months and months and months. But when I finally could dance, I danced to Feel So Good. It's playing this morning and I'm dancing. Today is the day. I've been procrastinating for weeks and now very little time remains before the ice begins to crust over the waters of the Penobscot River that runs through the middle of my little city. Some early mornings, sunlight shimmies through river crystals, a sure sign of impending winter. I've been on reconnaissance for days now, walking down by the riverbank, scouting out the best place, requirements, light-filled, accessible, and definitely hidden from passersby. For almost a year, I kept my Arik in the living room in the blue cardboard box I picked him up in, sealed, never opened. I was unable to consider my child as bone fragments. When I decided he couldn't live with me forever, I moved him to the storage room in my apartment building, and there he has waited. This morning breaks clean and brittle, a patina of sky through my bedroom window, crow flight in the foreground, crackles of newness as the city begins its cityness, coffee, oatmeal, check my email. It's a normal beginning to an abnormal day. And now here I stand on the edge of my 8x10 storage room. I have come for my son. Yesterday, I sorted through the green garbage bag of clothes the funeral home gave me when I picked up the box of his ashes. I had held onto the socks, stiff and dirty, like he always wore them. The sweatshirt his sister had given him that Christmas, sliced down the back for its easy removal. The camouflage pants with his name printed on them. A small pack, still carrying the paperwork for his instant tax return at H&R Block, the return that bought the gun. This morning, only his pants are left in the box and him, well, not exactly him, I know that. He can't be in a cardboard box, and he can't really be ashes. The river is not far from my apartment. I walk, Arik in a Shaw's supermarket bag. The handle breaks, and my son drops onto the sidewalk, still in his plastic bag that has popped out of the blue box I had slid open for ease of handling. I laugh as I pick him up, put him back in the box, put the box in the shopping bag. One of the homeless walks by. We speak. A brilliant cold beginning. This day's sun flashes in and out of the remaining leaves of the beech and maple. The scruffy alder branches brush my arms carrying the box, a box that is heavier than I had ever thought a 5-inch cube of ashes could be. I balance us down the hardening bank, a new slipperiness underfoot, until I reach the place where I know I will be able to kneel, linger a bit, and let my child go. I hear the early morning traffic on Main Street, the idling engines at the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru. I slip the top off, lift out the bag, untwist the tie, and dump the sepia-tinged ashes into this river that will carry them to the sea and around the world. I sit on a large cold boulder and watch magenta light rupture the sky. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's always such a, I think, remarkable experience getting to listen to other writers share their work. And today, I think, is definitely a fine example of just the power that our stories can have. It was interesting as I was listening. Last night, we talked a lot about transformation and being perceived by people and kind of claiming identity. And today felt very much like just kind of reckoning with loss and change. But Annaliese, I think you said it so beautifully, of like coming to terms with what has happened, but also seeing kind of the way through it. And I love how you described that in that ending piece. So yes, just thank you all for sharing. We're going to transition a little bit into Q&A and discussion. So if anyone listening in online has any thoughts or questions to share, please feel free to drop those in the chat. But Claire, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. Such beautiful work, ladies. Thank you so much. Such beautiful, moving work. I just, we're so honored. Annaliese, thank you for sharing such deeply personal experience with us. One of my guiding rules for writing is that I can't know what I want to say on the page until I actually write it, meaning that it's the act of writing that makes sense of my experience or makes sense of the story I want to tell if I'm writing fiction. And I'm wondering if that's true for you, if you discovered truth about the loss of your son through the act of writing about it.
I think, Claire, yes, I think that's very much how it works for me, much like with you. I find out how I feel about everything practically through writing, sometimes through talking, but never talking about me, and never through thinking. Thinking muddies things for me. So I would say that there's a truth about loss of my son that I came to through this. And there's a truth about him, and there's a truth about me, and there's a truth about the world and its concept and construct. There's a lot that I came through with this. But I do want to put out too that we all come into this, that thing that moves us to write what we write in different ways. And I'm just going to put this out there. I never thought I would ever write about this story in any way whatsoever. And then a number of years ago, a writer I really admire asked me to write about something I was afraid to write about. And it was just, anything small even. And what rose up for me was a particular occurrence in Auric's last time at home at Christmas. And that was it, but that was the driving force. That is what opened up that can that said, I need to process this. I just need to see where any of this goes and what rises up. So essentially what happens for me right now is I show up and move. And whatever presents itself is what presents itself, and I process it on paper. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Show up and move, I like it. Linda, my question for you is about writing during the pandemic. I was moved by all of your work, of course, but I was so surprised that you were able to write so beautifully about the pandemic in such short order. And I think I actually learned from what you wrote, because I was thinking, yes, exactly, as I was taking in your words. And I mean, I've really struggled through the pandemic to write, and I know a lot of people have. And yet I've told myself writing is the way to cope with it. But I just continue to have a hard time coming to the page. So I've told all my poet friends this, that I consider the ways of poets to be very mysterious. And I am wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you've captured this time in your work and what that's meant for you. I guess this is sort of like part two of my question for Annaliese, how we sort of process on the page, maybe.
Thank you. I guess that's a really great question. I think that I am also having difficulty writing during this time, but I have managed to write somewhat. I think I want to write about this time. But the time we are in is so historic, and so it feels so big and so multifaceted and has so many moving parts. It's a little bit like the way I imagine it might have been like to be part of World War II in Europe. You know, you don't get, we're not going to get all of the stories or maybe any perspective for many years on what we're going through right now. So how to begin with writing a poem? I think what I did was give myself the discipline of each day sitting down. I did write a poem a day month for myself. I didn't do it with anybody else. It mostly turned into like a hunk of writing I wouldn't even call a poem that I did every day. And I would turn it over and not look at it. And at the end of the month, I turned it back, the pages back over, and I went back into them. And I saw some places where I could work more and perhaps create a poem. I think it is important for me as a person to be able to write during this time to help me process. But I think a clue to it for me is that, our realms have been constricted. Our arena of people is pretty small now, except for Zooms that we may or may not do. And those are awkward, I find, nonetheless. So it's a little like, well, what is it that I see in my world that I can write about? So it's more like I'm doing diary entries. I can write about a little thing. And if I write about a little thing and I just pull on that thread a little bit, where is it going to be taking me? I would say that the things I'm writing perhaps are a little more simple because of that. I feel like I've lost an old sense of ambition about my writing. I feel that I've been changed by this time, and that I don't care anymore about where I get published or what other people think about what I'm writing. I just don't care about that. It seems so small-minded to be in that place with my writing. I just want to do the best I can do, with what I see and with what I feel. And I like sharing it. I think that's really important. So I think that's all I can say about this time and writing.
Well, thank you. I've also felt a loss of ambition. And actually, ambition is something that I have struggled for my whole life. It was something that I was sort of dissuaded from as a child, and that kind of stuck with me. So it was a good thing for me to learn how to embrace the little spirals of ambition that would sort of rise up out of me and do something about them. And I've lost that. And I think it's both good and bad. I think the positive is, like you say, that it's, looking at the bigger picture and finding sort of what really matters to me ultimately with my work, and not being so concerned about, getting work out there. But on the other hand, there are only so many ways to share our work. And I sort of want to recapture that desire to find the best ways, which ultimately I think oftentimes has to do with getting something published officially so that, we can actually get it out there. So I'm looking for that sort of new way to marry those two things. But I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I was feeling a little bit bad about that, sort of losing the work I've done on ambition. And you've sort of clarified for me now why I'm feeling that way, that there's some good in that feeling. It's not that I can sort of let that wash over me for a while and let that be okay before I sort of work my way back to whatever it is I want to do with my work. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Over on Facebook, Courtney, so from Quiet City, was commenting, just thank you all for your powerful work. She says it's a gift to witness you reading.
Oh, so
Thanks,
sweet.
Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney.
So before we wind down, Claire, I do want to ask you a question as well.
Okay.
And so I've heard a few variations of this story from early on as you've worked on it. And it's such an interesting structure, and I think way to take that image and then to kind of transform it into this non-traditional narrative. So can you talk a little bit about the original formation of how you told it, and then kind of like what the process of revising it has been like, as it's kind of changed shape and form?
So I originally wrote this. I feel like I'm always commenting on this, but I wrote a short story every day for a year once. And this story was one of the ones I drafted. And it was one of the ones that really stuck with me. So I went back to it quickly to pull it out and make it better. And it always, from the very beginning, it was written in this form. I wrote it as a kind of a report with it's like a series of excerpts from the report is the way that I have it in my head and the way it looks on the page. And what I struggled with was I knew what the last line should be, that Mata Hari's head is forever lost. And I had to sort of figure out how to string those excerpts together in a way that, for me anyway, feels satisfying as a build to that end. And I had to find what I always call find the story in the story. Because when you do play with form, which I do a lot, it means that you're not going for traditional story shape. And you're not going for sort of the traditional ideas of what makes a story, the triangle thing, rising up and then action, the resolution, so I have to find the story in the story. And the way that I did that was to think about the people who might or might not be attracted to such a spectacle. And I should probably say that I wish that I were so clever that I had come up with this notion of Mata Hari's head all on my own. I did not. I read it. I was, trolling for ideas, because when you write a story every day for a year, you start to dry up a little bit. And I had written a story about Anne Boleyn and a story about Anastasia Romanov. And so I was starting to think, famous or notorious murdered women was sort of becoming a theme for me. And Mata Hari came to me as someone who would fit that bill. And I looked her up on Wikipedia, and I was reading about her and looking at the pictures of her. And somewhere along the line, there was this note that there was this, so the museum that I name, I remember that the museum I name in the story is an actual museum that did actually have Mata Hari's embalmed head, and that the head had gone missing. And I just couldn't get over the fact that I just found it so creepy and weird and horrifying that they would embalm her head in the first place and make it a museum exhibit. And then the fact that it had disappeared just struck me as just something I could not let go of and had to have a story. So I wish I'd been clever enough to come up with that myself, but I wasn't. And I had to write about it. And so the story in the story for me is who would be attracted to such an exhibit, who would, even if they weren't attracted, would go to a contemporary history museum, fall on that exhibit, and what would they think? And so for me, the few people that I named, the few groups that see it, are kind of the story in it. And then to sort of the thread of the guy who's, I know I'm babbling, I'm sorry, but the thread of the guy who wrote the report too, I'm sort of hinting at what kind of guy he is, I feel like, in the piece. And that's kind of a thread too, like his desire to find out who's done it and what he's actually driven by and what he actually cares about and how he ends it. So for me, weaving those together put some story in the story. And I remember reading earlier versions of that to Salon, and it was moving into the ending that I could not get right. It took me about 5 tries until I finally felt good about it. So that's my long, unwieldy, uninteresting, I'm sorry, answer to that question.
No, it's always fascinating to hear a process, especially for the things where I think we take risks in the stories we're telling and how we're telling them.
Doesn't feel like a risk to me. You think that's taking a risk?
I mean, I think anything that steps outside of the normal lines has an element of risk to it. I mean, to tell a story about that and then in a way that, like you said, is not traditional story structure, like it's daring to do something differently, at least.
Okay, I'll take it. I'm not daring in any other way, so I'll take that.
But yeah, and with that, it brings us about to a close. So I'll wrap things up here. But thank you, Linda and Annaliese, and also Emma and Courtney from last night for joining us for this reading. But also, we just want to say a huge thanks to all of our readers from this season who really make this possible by being willing to share work, share words and stories, and really just open up to an audience like this. It is an honor to be able to do this and to be a part of it. And thank you also to Courtney, who has been, we say this over and over again, but such a supporter of our series and the arts in the area. Everyone go check out Quiet City Books. She's wonderful and has so many great books there.
And such an important part of our community too.
Definitely, yes. And also the Lewiston Public Library for getting books into people's hands and supporting what we do. And last of all, to everyone who has tuned in at any point in this, thank you for listening, for giving us the chance to do this. Stay tuned. We have our website, our social media. This wraps up our official season, but we are playing with ideas for things to do in the off season. So stay tuned for what that looks like. And we fully intend to be back next year. We'll see what the new year looks like, but this series is going to keep going. We will keep sharing our words and our stories and really just keep celebrating the community that we have here in Maine. So thank you all.
One second.
Thank you.
One thing. So absolutely to all of that. Thank you, Josh. I also just wanted to thank LA Arts, who invited us this year to participate in their virtual art walks. And we made genre spotlight videos for them, and they're at their Facebook page and I think their YouTube channel as well. But it was just lovely to be invited to do that and be part of another really important arts institution in our community. So that just felt wonderful, and it's one of our big silver linings in the pandemic to be able to expand a little bit in that. And we're hoping we can come back after the winter break and do some more of that. So again, yeah, my thanks to everyone as well. It's a terrific season and helped me get through the pandemic. So best wishes to everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay on the page.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.